Italy, 1944. The war had carved deep scars into the mountains and valleys of Europe, but none as haunting as those around Monte Cassino, the ancient hilltop monastery that had become one of the most brutal and mysterious battlegrounds of World War II. Among the Allied troops stationed at the foot of the mountain was Captain Edward "Eddie" Callahan, a British intelligence officer known not just for his courage, but for his mind, a man who saw war as a series of puzzles to be solved rather than battles to be fought. The Germans had turned the monastery into an impenetrable fortress. Allied assaults had failed time after time, and intelligence reports were conflicting. Some said the Germans were hiding priceless art and secret documents within its walls. Others whispered that the monks who remained there were not what they seemed. On a fog-drenched morning, Callahan received an urgent summons to the Allied command tent. Inside, General Harding and several intelligence officers huddled over reconnaissance photographs. "Captain Callahan," the general said, "our bombers are ready to flatten Monte Cassino, but there's a problem. 2 nights ago, one of our recon units spotted signals, light flashes, from inside the monastery. Someone's transmitting information to the Germans and we don't know who." Callahan frowned. "So, you want me to find the spy before the airstrike?" "Exactly. You have 48 hours. By nightfall, Callahan and a small team of operatives, Corporal Hughes, a codebreaker, and Lieutenant Sophia Leone, an Italian translator familiar with the region, slipped through enemy lines. The fog thickened as they climbed the slope, every sound magnified, the crunch of boots, the whisper of wind against ancient stones. At the monastery gate, they found the old Benedictine caretaker, Father Paolo, waiting with a lantern. His eyes were tired but calm. "You shouldn't be here," he warned softly. "This place is watched." "By whom?" Callahan asked. "Not just soldiers." The priest's gaze lingered on the shadows. "There are things here that don't sleep." Inside, the monastery felt like stepping into another world. Cracked walls, flickering candles, and echoes that seemed to come from nowhere. Callahan immediately noticed subtle signs, fresh footprints, a hidden radio antenna disguised as a crucifix, and German ration tins tucked behind the altar. "Someone been using this place as a communication hub," Hughes whispered. Callahan nodded. "The question is who?" As the night deepened, Callahan wandered through the stone corridors. His flashlight flickered against faded murals and ancient relics, until he stopped before a locked door with strange markings carved into it, Latin, but with a ciphered twist. He jotted them down, his mind already decoding patterns. When the symbols rearranged into letters, his heart skipped a beat. Veritas occulta. Hidden truth. Moments later, a soft creak echoed down the hall. Callahan turned, just in time to glimpse a shadow slipping through a side passage. He followed, silently drawing his revolver. The trail led him to the monastery's crypts, where torches burned low and the air was thick with dust and secrecy. There, among the tombs, he saw a radio operator hunched over a transmitter, wearing an Allied uniform. Before Callahan could speak, the man turned. His face was pale, eyes sharp with fear and defiance. "Captain Callahan," he said in perfect English, "you weren't supposed to find me." The voice was familiar. It was Lieutenant Grayson, an intelligence officer Callahan had once trained with in North Africa, someone presumed dead months earlier. But the look in Grayson's eyes said it all. He was the spy inside Monte Cassino. The crypt was silent except for the faint crackle of the radio. The signal light blinked like a heartbeat. Captain Callahan stared at Lieutenant Grayson, disbelief hardening into cold focus. "I saw your name on a casualty list in North Africa," Callahan said quietly. "You were reported killed in action." Grayson gave a small, humorless smile. "Officially, yes. It made it easier to disappear." Callahan's eyes narrowed. "So you've been working with the Germans all this time?" Grayson shook his head. Not with them, through them. I'm deep cover. MI6 assigned me to infiltrate the Abwehr network operating out of Cassino. Everything I've done here was part of that mission. It was a story Callahan wanted to believe, but something about Grayson's tone, his too perfect calm, didn't fit. If that's true, Callahan said, why transmit signals to enemy lines? Why send troop movements, supply routes, intel that's cost Allied lives? Grayson hesitated, then gestured to a small notebook beside the radio. Because those weren't our movements. They were false intelligence designed to mislead the Germans. Every transmission was sanctioned by London. Corporal Hughes flipped through the notebook, his face pale. Sir, these codes check out. They're using legitimate MI6 cipher protocols. Callahan frowned. Then why was I briefed? Grayson sighed. Because someone inside the Allied network is leaking information. They've compromised our higher command. I couldn't risk communicating through normal channels. I used the monastery as a blind spot. At that moment, Lieutenant Sophia Leone entered, breathless. Captain, we've intercepted a German dispatch. They're preparing a counterstrike at dawn. Coordinates match our camp near the river. Callahan froze. How did they get those coordinates? All eyes turned toward Grayson. He raised his hand slowly. It wasn't me, I swear. The Abwehr caught wind of something. Someone else is transmitting from this mountain. Callahan stepped closer. Then we find them now. The team split up, searching the monastery room by room. Every corner held secrets, the relic chambers, the ruined library, the echoing chapel. As the night deepened, Callahan began piecing together a larger picture. In the library, beneath a loose floorboard, he discovered a second transmitter, newer, stronger, with German components. And beside it, a torn page from the same cipher book Grayson had used. The implication hit him like ice. There was another operative, but they had access to MI6 encryption, someone from their own side. Callahan's voice was low when he spoke into his radio. Hughes, Leone, get back to the crypt. Now we've been played. When they regrouped, the monastery bells suddenly tolled midnight. The ancient sound echoed through the mountains like a warning. Then gunfire. Bullets shattered the stained glass windows above. A German patrol had surrounded the monastery. Ambush, Riley shouted, diving for cover. Grayson grabbed the radio and began sending frantic Morse code. This is Agent Greyhawk, emergency extraction, code Alpha. But before he could finish, a shell exploded near the courtyard, throwing debris across the crypt entrance. Through the dust and smoke, Callahan saw a figure retreating toward the cloisters, a monk, carrying a radio case identical to Grayson's. It wasn't superstition. It wasn't myth. The monastery had truly become a nest of spies. Callahan turned to his team. We're not leaving until we find out who that is. As flames licked the ancient walls and gunfire echoed in the halls of faith, the hunt for the real traitor began, a deadly race against time, with the airstrike countdown ticking closer every minute. The monastery was burning. Flames crawled up the stone walls, licking the frescoes that had survived centuries of wars and faith. The air was thick with smoke and the echo of gunfire. Captain Callahan pressed his back against a crumbling archway, his rifle ready. Through the haze, he could see Grayson and Lieutenant Leone dragging Riley, who had taken a bullet to the shoulder. "Leave me," Riley gasped. "Just go save the codes." Callahan shook his head. "Not a chance. We all get out or none of us do." But deep inside, he knew the window was closing fast. The Germans were closing in, and their airstrike would level the monastery at dawn. They reached the cloisters, where a figure in a monk's robe stood at the far end, still, silent, holding a radio transmitter. "Drop it," Callahan shouted. The monk turned slowly. His hood fell back, revealing a clean-shaven man with cold blue eyes and a British uniform hidden beneath the robes. Grayson froze. Major Allen Pierce, you. Pierce smirked. You always were clever, Grayson, clever enough to get too close to the truth. Callahan raised his rifle. You're the leak. You've been feeding the Abwehr since Sicily. Pierce nodded without shame. They offered something London never could, an end to this madness, information for peace. Peace, Leon snapped. You call selling out your own men peace? Pierce's expression didn't change. War is built on lies. I just chose a different side of them. The sound of approaching boots grew louder. German soldiers stormed through the archways, shouting commands. Pierce lifted the radio, speaking rapidly in German. The Allies are inside. Target coordinates confirmed. Begin strike in 10 minutes. Callahan fired one clean shot. The bullet struck the radio, shattering it in Pierce's hands. Pierce stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm. You're done, Callahan growled. But Pierce just smiled through the pain. You can't stop what's already in motion. The team ducked behind a marble statue as grenades exploded across the courtyard. The ground trembled. Grayson scrambled to the ruined transmitter, frantically trying to reach Allied command. If we don't abort that strike, they'll bomb us, and the Germans straight to hell. Sparks flew, static hissed, then. A faint voice answered. Greyhawk, repeat coordinates, verification needed. Grayson looked to Callahan. Sir, what's the code? Callahan hesitated. The correct code was top secret, known only to higher command. But if he didn't give it, they'd all die. He took a deep breath. Verification, Echo 7 Black. The line went silent. Then airstrike aborted. Evac en route, hold position. Relief washed over them, just for a moment. Because when Callahan turned, Pierce was gone. They found him moments later near the crypt, bleeding badly but still crawling toward a hidden passage beneath the altar. He looked up at Callahan, a faint smirk on his lips. You think you've won, Captain. The war doesn't end with bullets, it ends with secrets. He coughed, his strength fading. And this monastery holds one you can't imagine. Before Callahan could respond, Pierce pressed something into his hand, a metal key marked with the crest of the Vatican. Then his eyes went still. Hours later, Allied forces arrived and secured the site. As medics treated the wounded, Callahan stood alone in the crypt, staring at the ancient altar. He inserted the key into a hidden lock. A section of the stone floor shifted, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Inside the chamber lay an iron chest, sealed for centuries. On its lid was a Latin inscription. Veritas vincit bellum, truth conquers war. Callahan ran his fingers over the words. Knowing whatever was inside might rewrite everything he thought he knew about the war. As the dawn broke over the smoking ruins of Monte Cassino, he whispered, maybe Pierce was right. The real war was never fought on the battlefield.